Right now, while Americans are distracted by endlessly chaotic elections, screaming matches on cable television, and the latest manufactured domestic outrage, something incredibly dangerous is quietly sitting in a highly secure vault deep inside the Pentagon. It is a blueprint. It is not a generic contingency plan for a minor border skirmish or a diplomatic standoff. It is a highly classified, rigorously simulated, step-by-step playbook for the complete and total dismantling of the Islamic Republic of Iran. And recently, terrifying whispers of what is actually inside this plan have started to leak into the highest levels of the global intelligence community. Most people think a war with Iran would look exactly like the disaster in Iraq or the 20-year quagmire in Afghanistan. They imagine a long, drawn-out invasion, hundreds of thousands of boots on the ground, and endless desert patrols. They are dead wrong. The leaked framework does not call for an invasion. It calls for an absolute systemic erasure. It outlines a 72-hour window of extreme, overwhelming, and entirely unprecedented kinetic violence, designed to break a nation of almost 90 million people before their leadership even realizes what hit them. But here is the terrifying catch that keeps four-star generals awake at night in Washington. If this 72-hour plan is ever actually activated, it won't just finish Iran. It is practically guaranteed to trigger a chain reaction that could shatter the global economy, instantly drag in two rival nuclear superpowers, and fundamentally change the American way of life forever. So, what exactly happens when the President of the United States finally gives the green light? How do those terrifying 72 hours actually unfold in real time? And what is the dark, hidden strategic cost that nobody in Washington wants to admit on camera? Let's rewind for a second and look at the geopolitical board. For over 40 years, the United States and Iran have been locked in a brutal, bloody phantom war. We are talking about targeted assassinations, sophisticated cyber attacks, massive proxy militias firing rockets into remote desert bases, and covert sabotage missions. It is a deadly, high-stakes game of political chess where both sides are constantly bleeding, but neither side actually wants to flip the table. But deterrence always has an expiration date. Intelligence officials know that eventually someone, somewhere, makes a fatal miscalculation. Maybe Iran finally crosses the ultimate red line and enriches enough weapons-grade uranium to assemble a functional nuclear warhead. Maybe a rogue proxy group gets lucky and a swarm of cheap suicide drones slips through the defenses, hitting an American aircraft carrier in the Persian Gulf and killing hundreds of young sailors. The exact trigger almost doesn't matter anymore. What matters is the terrifying response. Because when that red line is finally crossed, the phantom war immediately ends, and the 72-hour clock begins. Now imagine you are sitting inside the White House Situation Room. It is 3 in the morning. The coffee is stale. The air in the underground bunker is suffocatingly tense, and the National Security Advisor has just handed the President of the United States a single sheet of paper confirming the worst. Diplomacy is dead. The sanctions have failed. The order is given. Hour 0. You might expect the night sky over Tehran to immediately fill with screaming fighter jets. But that is not how modern, high-end warfare works. The first weapon fired in this massive conflict makes absolutely no sound at all. Before a single physical bomb is dropped, the United States military activates a massive, coordinated, and utterly devastating cyber offensive. We are talking about highly advanced, custom-built malware, stockpiled secretly for years, injected directly into Iran's national infrastructure grid. Within a matter of minutes, the power grid collapses in major Iranian cities. Traffic lights die in Tehran. The financial networks instantly freeze. But far more importantly, the military communication arrays go completely dark. The Pentagon calls this blinding the target. You cannot fight what you cannot see, and you cannot command an army if you cannot talk to them. But the Iranians are not stupid. They have spent the last 4 decades preparing for exactly this moment. They know they cannot match the American military head-to-head in a conventional fight. So they don't even try. As their radar screens go black across the country, pre-delegated, decentralized orders automatically kick in. Deep beneath the Zagros Mountains, in massive subterranean tunnels that American spy satellites cannot penetrate, heavy steel doors begin to slowly grind open. Iran's ballistic missile forces, which happen to be the largest and most sophisticated in the entire Middle East, are actively moving into firing positions. And this is where things get incredibly dangerous for the United States. The American military now has less than 60 minutes to completely dismantle an integrated air defense network that spans a mountainous country roughly the size of Alaska before those thousands of Iranian missiles can launch. Enter the Invisible Armada. High above the Persian Gulf, stealth bombers that took off from bases in Missouri almost 20 hours earlier are silently slipping into Iranian airspace. B-2 Spirits and F-35 Lightning IIs. They aren't there to destroy the civilian cities. They are there to violently kick the door off the hinges. They drop a massive, invisible curtain of electronic warfare, completely scrambling whatever radar frequencies survived the cyber attack, while precision munitions quietly annihilate the surface-to-air missile batteries. The sky over Iran is suddenly pried open. And what comes next is a scale of organized destruction not seen on this planet since the Second World War. Thousands of Tomahawk cruise missiles launch simultaneously from American destroyers and nuclear submarines lurking quietly in the Arabian Sea. They streak low over the desert, hugging the mountainous terrain, completely invisible to what's left of the Iranian early warning systems. Their targets are not politicians. Their targets are the central nervous system of the regime. Command bunkers, vast drone manufacturing factories, military airstrips, and the heavily fortified nuclear enrichment sites scattered across the country. The sheer volume of explosives dropped in the first 24 hours is specifically designed by military planners to create a psychological shockwave so severe that the Iranian command structure simply collapses in on itself. But remember those underground tunnels. The massive, sprawling cities buried under the mountains, hiding the ballistic missiles. This is the exact moment American intelligence officials realize they have a very serious problem. Because no matter how many millions of dollars of bombs the United States drops from the sky, you simply cannot destroy what is buried hundreds of feet under solid granite. And Iran is about to hit back. Hard. Now pay attention to what happens next, because this is where the entire American strategy starts risking a global catastrophe. And this is where the strategy completely changes. As the clock hits hour 24, the night sky over the Middle East lights up in reverse. Hundreds, potentially thousands of Iranian solid-fuel ballistic and cruise missiles are launched simultaneously. But they aren't aiming at the continental United States. They don't have the range for that. Instead, they target the very architecture of American power in the region. Vital U.S. military bases in Bahrain, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates are suddenly under a massive, overwhelming barrage. The American Patriot missile defense batteries fire relentlessly into the dark, painting the night sky with fiery intercepts. But it is a brutal numbers game. You can only intercept so many incoming targets before the defensive magazines run completely dry. Some of the missiles inevitably get through. The casualties are no longer a theoretical exercise on a whiteboard. American soldiers are dying. The region is engulfed in flames, and this is where the hidden alliances finally reveal themselves. Iran doesn't fight alone. Within hours, their vast network of proxy forces activates across the entire map. Hezbollah in Lebanon unleashes tens of thousands of rockets directly into Israel, forcing the Israelis into a desperate two-front war of survival. The Houthis in Yemen begin indiscriminately firing anti-ship ballistic missiles at anything moving in the Red Sea. The entire Middle East becomes a chaotic, interconnected war zone. But the real nightmare, the true strategic checkmate that Iran has carefully planned for decades, isn't actually aimed at the military at all. It's aimed directly at your wallet. And this is the exact moment the rest of the world gets dragged, kicking and screaming, into the fire. We need to talk about a narrow, highly vulnerable 21-mile stretch of water called the Strait of Hormuz. Roughly 20% of the world's global oil supply passes through this tiny choke point every single day. It is the literal jugular vein of the global industrial economy. And in hour 48 of the war, Iran officially severs it. Swarms of Iranian fast attack boats, heavily armed with anti-ship missiles, and thousands of sea mines flood the strait. They don't need to sink a massive American aircraft carrier to win this phase of the war. All they need to do is hit one single commercial oil tanker. Just one. Because the exact second a burning, heavily damaged supertanker begins to sink in the Strait of Hormuz, global shipping insurance rates go to absolute infinity. Commercial traffic stops completely. The reaction is instantaneous and brutal. On Wall Street, the stock market doesn't just dip, it falls off a cliff. Crude oil spikes to $200, maybe even $300 a barrel in a matter of hours. Gas prices in the United States double, then triple almost overnight. Global supply chains violently freeze. Panic buying empties grocery store shelves from Los Angeles to London. The American public, who just 48 hours ago were proudly cheering for a decisive military victory on social media, are suddenly staring directly at a crippling economic depression engineered from halfway across the world. If you want to understand the real power games shaping the world without the boring mainstream news filters, make sure to subscribe. Because the mainstream media will happily tell you this is just another regional conflict. But the intelligence agencies know the terrifying truth. This extreme economic chaos isn't an accident. It is Iran's ultimate leverage. They are betting everything on the assumption that the American public simply does not have the political stomach to pay $10 for a gallon of gas just to secure a strip of desert thousands of miles away. But the Pentagon's leaked framework anticipates this exact move, and their planned response is apocalyptic. As the clock aggressively ticks toward hour 72, the gloves completely come off. The United States military heavily shifts from targeted tactical strikes to total systemic annihilation. We are talking about the deployment of the massive ordnance penetrator, a terrifying 30,000-pound bunker buster designed to trigger localized earthquakes, dropping directly onto Iran's deepest, most heavily defended nuclear facilities like Fordo. Naval armadas move in to aggressively sweep the mines, fighting intense, close-quarters naval battles that look like something out of a terrifying sci-fi movie. The ultimate goal is to shatter the Iranian military so deeply, so permanently, that they physically cannot issue another order. And by the end of the 72 hours, the United States will likely succeed. The surface-level military infrastructure of Iran will be reduced to smoking craters. The nuclear program will be set back by decades. The regime's leadership will be either dead or buried so deep in bunkers that they are entirely disconnected from the outside world. Mission accomplished, right? The 72 hours are up. The US military has executed the most flawless, devastating, and complex air and naval campaign in human history. The Pentagon celebrates behind closed doors. The politicians take their victory laps on cable television, praising American military supremacy. But that was only the beginning. Because winning the first 72 hours is the easy part. Surviving what comes next is the real problem. And here is the political chess game nobody is talking about on the evening news. While the United States has just dumped billions of dollars of high-end ordnance and completely depleted its strategic stockpile of precision munitions, two men have been watching this entire spectacle very closely from Moscow and Beijing. You see, the scariest part about this war is that Iran might not actually be the ultimate target. They might just be the bait. China has been waiting patiently for years for the United States to commit its heavy forces, its critical ammunition, and its domestic political capital to a massive, draining conflict in the Middle East. If the US military is completely bogged down trying to clear the Strait of Hormuz, dealing with massive regional fallout, and trying to desperately contain a heavily destabilized Middle East, what happens to the Pacific? Who is left to protect Taiwan? The terrifying reality of the leaked Pentagon plan is that it works too well. It creates a geopolitical power vacuum so massive that it pulls the entire world order out of alignment. An obliterated Iran doesn't mean regional peace. It means millions of desperate refugees pouring into neighboring countries. It means heavily armed proxy militias operating in a lawless, chaotic void, completely unchained from their former masters in Tehran. It means Russia suddenly loses its main supplier of cheap kamikaze drones for the war in Europe, prompting them to take desperate, highly unpredictable actions to secure their own borders. The United States would have decisively won the battle, but they may have just walked blindfolded into a catastrophic global trap. What happens to the American defense industry when the military asks for 10,000 new cruise missiles, but the supply chains required to build them are currently blockaded by China in the South China Sea? The hypocrisy of the political elites will be on full display. Politicians who voted for the strike will quietly buy stock in defense contractors like Lockheed Martin and Raytheon, watching their portfolios surge while the average American citizen cannot afford to fill up their car to drive to work. This is the dark reality of modern global conflict. It is never just about the bombs. It is about the economic warfare that follows the bombs. By hour 73, the smoke will start to slowly clear over Tehran. The initial shock and awe will be over, but the geopolitical shockwave will just be reaching Washington, D.C. Because the next global conflict may not begin with a massive land invasion or a declaration of war. It may begin with one perfectly calculated political distraction. The United States absolutely has the military power to finish Iran in 3 days, but doing so might just be the exact mechanism that finishes the American empire as the dominant global superpower. The trap is perfectly designed, the bait is set, the clock is ticking. And the frightening part is, this 72-hour countdown may already be happening right in front of us, while we are all too distracted to even notice.